Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to the Advancement Podcast Quarantine Edition. You've been quarantined too long. I've been in the cabin so long, the fever's gone straight to my brain. I am Todd Barrow, and I'm joined, as always, with my trusty sidekick. Some call him Robin. I call him Tim Ware.
Wait a minute.
I'm Batman. You're Robin.
I'm the Lone Ranger. You're not Tonto.
No, I'm not Tonto. Although I think here in our day and time that may be racially insensitive, but it's fine.
Oh, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. I apologize for all those who don't remember the Lone Ranger.
Who would be offended? Yeah. So we're joined again by Dr. Jeanie.
Dr. Jeanie Clarkson.
Now you're from Michigan and Ohio. I've got to ask: who are your sports teams, if you even have any?
Sports are a really big deal here, and I know nothing about it.
Oh, okay. So we will not offend any of our listeners today.
We can get Bud. We need to ask her husband, Bud. He probably knows the sports scene.
Right, but I will tell you this. Because I live in Ohio, my office is in Michigan. It's like right on the line. I had bought a little table for my office because I was doing some things, and I picked it up in Ohio, and it said Ohio State Buckeyes. And I brought it to my office in Michigan.
No.
And I learned that this was not good.
This is not good.
Yeah, I would imagine that would not go over well.
That's so good.
So they're very serious here. I do know that.
Yeah, sports are very serious, especially college sports. That's awesome.
Well, they're not very serious right now, but yes, eventually they will be again.
No, but hey, I did see on the news there's this British sportscaster who has nothing, so he's broadcasting something different every day. So they did the little thing where he's calling the people as they walked across the crosswalk like a race. he was calling his dogs. He put down the food bowls and he was calling to see which one was going to eat it first. So
he needs to come commentate some of my kids' sporting events. That might be a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, well, Dr. Jeanie Clarkson, she's a clinical psychologist. She is a Christian psychologist, and she is a author of The Emotionally Intelligent Pastor, a guide for clergy and other church leaders. And she does study in the emotional intelligence and performance-based self-esteem to help with minimizing burnout in pastors. And she's the founder of Christian Care Connection, a multi-site counseling service in the greater Toledo, Ohio, but offices in Michigan, which is across the border from Toledo. So as we just heard.
But is now on telemedicine, so it doesn't matter where you are. So
that's right. She's doing it all by teleconference right now. So anyway, Dr. Jeanie, thanks again for being with us to continue our conversations about health of the pastor, emotional health of pastors and leaders during this quarantine time. Todd is already spazzing because he's been quarantined too long.
Too long. Well, and that kind of rolls me into my first question, Dr. Jeanie. I am an extrovert.
Me too.
I love people. And it's really hard for me as a pastor. Like, I felt it yesterday. I got on stage and I felt almost just a disappointment in my heart that I did not get to see people again another week. How do we manage that as pastors? How do we manage? And I know there's some introverted pastors out there. I don't want to say that all pastors are extroverted, because it's not true.
No, but all pastors do. That empty room
Yeah.
That empty room. I mean, pastors, when you are used to getting up to preach and you see and having people, I did see a post this week from a guy on yesterday, and he said, normally I make the joke before first service, where are all the people? And he said, I wish just those people were here today.
Yeah.
You know, so there's that weight of an empty room.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm coming into my office every day where I usually see at least one or two people, at least in the building. But last week I was at home 2 days, all by myself, alone. And I had a coffee pot sitting there. But both days I decided to get in my car and drive to Starbucks just to go through the drive-through to say hello to the Starbucks barista. And so we're all feeling the pinch. And I'm an introvert. So
us extroverts are dying.
Yeah.
And I was feeling it. I'm introverted. I love my time alone, but it's like, I got to see a face. I got to talk.
Although I cannot handle the 30-minute Starbucks line. I love Starbucks, but good grief. It was 30 minutes the other day. I was like, I got other things to do.
Yeah. But I think there's two things to answer your question. The first is for pastors like yourself, Todd, is and all of us, but is to recognize, okay, it's a genuine need that we have to connect with people, and it's good to meet that need, the needs of our people and our own needs. And I think having a mindset that I'm just going to adapt to this and I'm going to find creative ways to meet the need, because really there are, if you get on in the virtual rooms like we're in right now, team members of the church, they need extra time. Maybe members that you haven't connected with for a while. I would say if you get too feeling isolated, making a list of members to contact and even ask them if they could do this face-to-face or even by phone, they would feel so taken care of. And you would also get that sense of connection. Another thing would be clergy groups. If you're a part of a clergy group, transfer to this mode. If you're not a part of a clergy group, you can call some church pastor down the road. I think everybody's feeling it, so they'd be willing to have a virtual cup of coffee with you. So I think the first thing is meet the need.
I do wonder, there was a study that came out, I read, that talked about how the loneliness epidemic in America right now, and social media and those type of things. And because of these other things, and now we're being forced into a little more virtual world. There is something kind of amazing that it wasn't that long ago in our culture in America, just 110 years ago, 120 years ago, we were still primarily a rural nation, and you only saw your family sometimes for 6-7 days a week. And but our society has changed so much that I have wondered about loneliness for pastors, for congregations, and I understand the virtual piece of connection. Is that from a clinical perspective? I know it's meeting the need, but does it satisfy in every case, or is it gonna do enough? I mean, it may have to do enough, but from a clinical perspective, when we think about this, because it's not just a depression about there's no people in the room I'm preaching to, but there's this is a to me feels like a great opportunity for the enemy of our souls to sow into this loneliness thing. I even read one article where someone was predicting that if this goes if this turns from weeks into months, that there was likely be an uptick in suicide rate.
Yeah.
And so these things are concerned.
They are. I've read that too. And anxiety, depression, suicides could all go up. And I think a lot of times pastors feel a sense of isolation. I mean, you can be in a group and feel alone.
Absolutely. I think there's all kind of research and articles and stuff been written on pastoring being so lonely because you have trouble connecting to your congregation automatically. So this just feels like an opportunity for an uptick in that to me.
Yes, I think it's going to require more virtual contact. As far as completely meeting the need, well, like you said, it's never going to feel right completely. But I think that if we have a mindset that I'm going to make the best of it, I'm going to go for, maybe there's opportunities to connect or to talk to some people that I really haven't talked to in a while, or to use some ways of connection. Also, I think the other thing is connecting with other clergy, with other pastors, because they can relate in a way that, your members just can't. So I would encourage any pastor to do that.
So what I hear you saying, we talked in the last conversation with you about maintaining our routine as much as possible and then making the adjustments we needed to. So this is going to be, it sounds to me like this is an intentional adjustment that we need to make for the sake of our own emotional health, as well as for the sake of our leadership.
Right. Rather than resist it, embrace it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to feel less stress if you just go ahead and lean into it and embrace it. You're going to feel more stress if you resist it.
I like that. Lean into it.
And Dr. Jeanie, I heard a podcast this week. I won't give it a plug because they're not a sponsor, but they said those that are a lot in the podcast world have probably heard it, but they said almost they shied against being optimistic during this time, because when we're optimistic, it's very easy for us to get our hopes up and then dashed. They said it's almost better just to be a realist and just kind of deal with the blows as they come.
I don't know who said that, but man, that just sounds unbiblical to me.
Well, it was from a psychological standpoint, not a religious standpoint.
All right.
What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think we need to be both realist and optimist. I don't think we need to get false hopes up.
Yeah.
I think we do, if we don't empathize with the real pain and the real struggle that people are feeling and that we're feeling, then nobody's going to want to listen to us, and it's not going to minister to them. So I think we have to be realistic that, man, this is what's happening there. Some of you lost your jobs, some of you can't see your grandkids, you don't know when you're going to get to see them. I think we don't know what's going to happen. So I think we do need to be realistic, and it may be a long time, so not give people false hope. But at the same time, hope in the gospel. I mean, for one, this didn't take God by surprise.
Absolutely not.
And in fact, It didn't even take our scientific community by surprise. They've been predicting at some point, that was a matter of if rather than when, if we were listening. And people in the past have lived through these things of plagues. And fortunately, we've never had to. But we're going to get through it. And we can take seriously what the scientific community is saying, but we can also trust God, because God is our protector, our defender. He upholds us with his hand. He's going to provide for us. So it can be a time to grow stronger in faith. And eternally, we have eternal security to offer at a time when people do not feel secure at all.
I think that's, maybe I spoke too strong to say that about being totally realistic, because you're right that we need to. I agree with that. I have felt from the beginning of this crisis, and Todd, we've talked about it, that I think this is that there is an opportunity for us to communicate the hope of eternity in a way to this generation that has not been communicated in my entire lifetime.
Yeah.
And so we do carry that. We carry that in such a way that's just real. But that's a interesting thing. It's tough as a psychologist, help us a little bit maybe with this thought, because as a pastor, so often when you're preaching, we're trying to preach these hopeful things, and balancing hope, eternal hope, and reality, that can sometimes be a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's, I think the easiest thing for me to think of is like when you're sitting with a family member and the person is dying. You're offering them hope, but it's hard to know what to say. So you don't offer false hope, but you offer the comfort that is there. And of course, I think our situation is a little more positive because we can believe God for our protection.
I guess maybe, for those pastors that really love the pastoral care, those ones who are built, who God's designed and have that high care heart, I guess they can, navigating some of this may be easier, other than the fact that they'll also usually pick up somebody's burden a lot heavier. But for those of us that dread every hospital visit, and care is not our, mercy and grace are not natural to us.
Come on, Tim. That's not natural for you. I mean,
hey, Todd, is that natural? Is that natural for you? I know I've never known that either.
It's a little easier for me than maybe others. I know deep down inside, you don't know that, but I have 2 or 3 feelings down there. But you have none.
I have one. It's just buried. You have to fight. It's kind of like that on-off button. You just got to get in just the right spot.
Yeah.
Be careful, guys. You're hanging out with a psychologist here.
Uh-oh.
Yes, we know. We know. We know we're messed up.
She's going to start with, how does that make you feel?
Jeanie, I was with another leader, a leader in our movement, and we were being certified in MBTI some years back, and we're both high ENTJs, and so get it done. It's okay if those people, they'll be all right, kind of. And the facilitator, we were the only 2 ENTJs in the room. For those who are listening, that's a high-driven leader, and everybody, all of the emotional people in the room, that in that world, the I's and the P's couldn't believe some of the things that we would say. And the facilitator said, and these are the preachers in the room. So well, I know I messed up. It's okay.
But people don't really need us to fix it for them. We have to really trust that just being there and connecting, and our presence and is comforting to people. We don't have to have the exact right words to say. We can just be real. And, we're stressed too. And that is comforting in ministering to people.
That's good. That I appreciate you saying that. It is a concern. Over the last few years, we've seen the depression rate increase in ministers. I mean, last year alone, there were 2 or 3 pastors that made national news for committing suicide and falling into traps. We're seeing these traps because of emotional needs just getting wrecked in pastors' lives, and which is why this conversation is so important.
Yes.
Which is I know what you specialize in, and I love the church, but I love pastors. That's really kind of at the heart of what mine and Rachel's call is. And it's part of why we started this podcast, is to become a resource, because we love pastors and pastors and ministers that we talk to and that we deal with. This is a weight for us. And it's a concern in this season that we could see pastors, that this increase of emotional weight could have greater impact in these areas. I think sometimes after a crisis, it's hard for pastors to come out of it than it is for their congregants.
Right. And I would encourage pastors, if you're struggling, to reach out to someone. There's teletherapy, there's coaching. You guys offer coaching, I offer coaching. There's a lot of places that you can reach out to for support and help. We're all human beings. But back, one other thing, when we were talking earlier about the extroverted pastors.
Yes.
I was saying that we need to recognize the need and meet the need. But I was also going to say we could recognize that there may be a personal opportunity here, that even though it's tough to be disconnected, but to really tune in to connection with God. And even with ourselves. Sometimes to be alone with ourselves can be uncomfortable because we may have things that we haven't wanted to deal with. And maybe this is a time to, even though it's uncomfortable, to be and to reflect and to connect with God. And could even document it in a journal as a way to do it.
Yes. Extroverts often prefer verbal. For me, I think part of it's the verbal processing component versus just soul introspection.
Mm-hmm.
That I struggle with, because I am a verbal processor. My son is. He calls us from college. I just need to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nobody right now because there's nobody on campus but a few of us. And so, when we face some, I think that's a part of this. It's just new roads to navigate. But what I hear you saying is that number one, we said it already, God's not surprised. And I think, but this is an opportunity, to use a word from the last podcast. This is a time where there's some opportunity. Not necessarily, it's not all negative.
Right. There's opportunity for personal growth here.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also vast opportunity to minister to people. Jesus went to where the people were gathered, and right now they're all gathered online. I heard from a pastor, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that Facebook crashed on a Sunday morning recently because of the number of people watching church services, and that particular church service, the attendance was up online. So this is a time, we don't want there's concern of having a social recession, which we don't want that. We want to stay connected. But the risk is having a spiritual recession. We don't want a spiritual recession. We want to take the opportunity for a spiritual resurgence.
I think statistically, almost the online church attendance is up, and we've actually seen in our evangelical churches online are seeing an uptick in people coming to faith in Christ. The world is looking for hope, and the church still has that answer. And this, I'm not sure that the Lord's not behind some of this, because it's pushing the church outside the walls to a place it hasn't been for generations.
Definitely out of our comfort zone, which, that's usually where growth takes place.
Yeah. Even though we hate it.
Even though we hate it, I hate it all the time. All right. Hey, Dr. Jeanie, thank you for being with us, and you're going to be with us for one more episode, as we're going to and so I thank you for that. But why don't you go ahead, if somebody'd like to contact you, you can. Her book is available. How would people get your book if they wanted to?
It's on both Wesleyan Publishing House or Amazon.com. I believe it's on Barnes & Noble, but just as a Kindle on there. You have to type in the words exactly, The Emotionally Intelligent Pastor, and it should come up. You can.
Otherwise, you'll get The Emotionally Intelligent Leader, I think, right?
Well, that's probably a good book too, but I didn't write it, so
Shouldn't get the cut on that one.
Get the Emotionally Intelligent Pastor.
Right.
You can follow us on Facebook at JeanieMillerClarkson.com, on Twitter at JeanieClarkson.com, LinkedIn at Jeanie Miller Clarkson, and our website is JeanieMillerClarkson.com. And we put out, if you sign up for our weekly writing, we put out tips on emotionally intelligent pastoring every week.
Good.
Tips on those other venues regularly.
Good. All right, Todd, what's your takeaway from our conversation?
Let me look back through my notes. I wrote a couple things down.
I really enjoyed writing things down
with my Apple Pencil.
With my pen.
Yeah, we know you got your fountain pen. It's fine. I liked what you said about making calls to members. It's something I hadn't thought about, that, in a time when people are hungering for connection, one of the things that we could do that is very simple, doesn't take a whole lot of, it takes time, but it doesn't take a whole lot of resources, is just picking up the phone and calling people and telling them that we're praying for them and ministering to them. I love that. And then encouraging us to find time to reach out and be in groups with other pastors and clergy members to kind of support ourselves during this time. Those two things were really, really good pieces for me.
I think that last one, Todd, that one struck me because I think what I'm seeing is pastors are turning in harder toward their congregation because of the extra work.
Oh, yeah.
And which isn't necessary. They're turning towards their people, but they're going to isolate themselves from their ministerial community, I think. And so being intentional about that really stuck in my head. All right. Well, thank you. We'll see you next time on the Advancement Podcast
Quarantine Edition.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.